Greetings to all my fellow traditionalist Catholics. This is Sergio Becerra II. So, as we all heard the news this morning that Antipope Francis has died at age 88. And I have to say, this was totally unexpected that he has passed away, since yesterday was Easter Sunday. I mean, he did look okay when he gave his blessing on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, and then was on the ground in St. Peter's Square in the Pope Mobile, blessing and meeting with the crowd. So, um, I don't know whether to say this was a huge shock to the world, but I can tell you this: there was no doubt he wasn't gonna um, make it very soon. After he was recently in the hospital throughout February due to having bronchitis and then pneumonia in both his lungs, in which soon after he was released, he was on an oxygen tank. But we know for a while he was in a wheelchair after having problems walking. Another thing was, while in the hospital, way before his death, he did come close to death at least twice, and then passing out sometimes while kept in the hospital. So I kind of figured he wasn't going to make it much longer. And sure enough, this comes as a big surprise. Just a couple of weeks before Francis's death, he did meet with King Charles III of England, a notorious heretic of the Anglican faith in England, and then, of course, the so-called head of the Church of England, which, of course, no monarch is head of any church when he's not the vicar of Christ. Then, of course, the so-called Defender of Faith, a title that's been held since Henry VIII, while Henry was still a Catholic before he abandoned Rome and broke his allegiance from Rome and the Church just to start his own over a divorce. So, so he's now gone. No doubt that his recent illnesses, while he was in the hospital, may have done it. Even news outlets are saying, from medical experts, saying that yeah, that probably his bronchitis and pneumonia is what kind of probably did it. So now, as we all know, a funeral will take place probably by Friday. So I'll probably be up early watching the funeral and see how this goes. And then, of course, once the funeral is over, there's 10 days of mourning before the start of the next conclave. As we all know, that Antipope Francis was one of the biggest heretics and apostates ever. Now, why do I call him an anti-pope? As I've said in recent videos in the past, I'm a traditionalist, sedevacantist Roman Catholic. I do not recognize Francis as the true pope. I do not recognize his predecessors from the start of Vatican II up to him as true popes. Therefore, I do not recognize the so-called popes of Vatican II. They are anti-popes. I do not recognize the teachings of the Second Vatican Council. Therefore, I do not recognize the so-called pontificates of John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul the 1st, John Paul the 2nd, Benedict the 16th, and now with Francis. I only recognize the true popes going all the way back with St. Peter all the way to Pope Pius the 12th, the last true pope. So therefore, I do not recognize Francis as the Pope. I do not even recognize him as the Roman Pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church. And the reason why I say he's a heretic and an apostate, I'm not the only one saying this. If you look at the Diamond Brothers, Peter Michael Diamond of VaticanCatholic.com, in which their channel is also here on YouTube as well. I'm not only going to be uploading this video onto YouTube, I'm also going to be doing this on another platform. I'm probably sure some of you are familiar with Rumble. Yeah, this is where this video is going to be uploaded to, both YouTube and Rumble. Just letting you all know. And I'm going to tell you why he's a heretic. Now, I did do one video in the past about why I say he's illegitimate, including his pontificate. You can go to my playlist, look up Bible study, theology videos, and I'll give, which you'll see my explanation. So, as we all know, he became the first Jesuit, quote unquote, Pope. But the Society of Jesus has gone like really liberal over the last few decades. Not like as it was before, holding up its true conservative values and ways, going all the way back to the 16th century with St. Ignatius of Loyola, when this was first introduced to Pope Paul III, back when the church was really worried that the Catholic faith would die because of the rise of Protestantism in Germany because of Martin Luther. But the Jesuits have gone like really liberal, especially another notorious heretic. That would be quote unquote Father James Martin, who posted on Twitter, "Rest in peace, Pope Francis." Well, I can tell you this: Francis did not go to heaven. After the way he's contradicted the church teachings, the dogmas, the Bible, and then, of course, being a total apostate by siding with other religions than having to stick with Christianity in particular. Now, he has said some controversial stuff that contradicts the church's teachings and even the Bible. In his early years as Pope, he one time did say this, which of course I even took offense to it, on the subject of same-sex marriages. He one time said, if someone is gay, who am I to judge? Well, even though it's God that judges, but still us as Catholics, we kind of do judge others who they are and what they are. Of course, we're going to be judgmental with sodomites. And I know there's some other things that do contradict the church's teachings and its dogmas. Well, here's the thing. I remember him saying, you don't need to be Catholic to go to heaven. Well, first of all, you do need to be Catholic and to go to heaven, because Catholicism is the one and only true Christianity. Other Christian sects, such as Protestantism and Orthodox of Eastern Europe, they're not the real church. Because, like I mentioned, Luther, he started his own church. And then you got many other Protestant heretics starting their own churches, like John Calvin, John Smith of the Baptist Church, and others too along the line. Then you've got the Eastern Orthodox Church of Eastern Europe, like Russia, Ukraine, Romania, and Bulgaria. Those are schismatic churches, and they are not with the Roman Church. Only the Church of Rome is the one true Christian church, which has existed and founded by Jesus centuries ago. He also said, if I remember correctly, I think he said this one time, if I remember correctly, that trying to convert someone to Catholicism was a sin. I don't remember if he said that, but I'm pretty sure he did. But of course, that's just both stupid and wrong. And another thing that I don't remember what else he said. Um, oh yeah, now I remember. He said if he said or uttered anything that was considered heretical, he wouldn't care. He did not care. And to show that he is not a real Catholic, not a real Pope, when it came to Martin Luther and the Lutherans, he said that Lutherans were better Christians than Catholics are, and somehow found Luther to be somewhat of a hero and inspiration to us all, which is completely heretical, and of course still makes him an apostate. And then, of course, one of the biggest things that did infuriate me as a true traditionalist Catholic, those like me that attend the traditional Latin Mass. One thing is for sure, I know I've said this in the past uh, before. If I can remember, I would have to look back at some videos. But if you want to check him out, you can look for yourself. He did, in fact, try to do away with the Latin Mass altogether, and I know he wrote a document further restricting the use of the Latin Mass, and of course, he's been under fire from it. Critics such as Cardinal Robert Serra, who has spoken out on that decision by Francis, saying that restricting and trying to do away with traditional mass would be a big mistake to those who still attend it. Because Francis's goal is to make everything about Vatican II. Everything has to be Vatican II. Therefore, all masses have to be said in all languages. The reason why those like me and many others attend the traditional Latin Mass, because Latin, the old language of the Romans, is the only language that the devil hates, that cannot understand it. If you get rid of that particular mass, you're just giving the devil the edge here. But Francis believes everything should be said in all languages. Therefore, mass must be said in all languages across the world. So those like me, other traditionalists, including the Diamond Brothers of Vatican Catholic, there's another. There's a website I'm familiar with that I also follow on X, also known as Twitter, Novus Ordo Watch, which of course is a Sedevacanist web website, not associated with other traditionalist groups like the SSPX or the FSSP. They know too that Francis is not the real Pope. And those like myself, Vatican Catholic, and Novus Ordo Watch have criticized Francis's actions, including all these so-called clerics within the church, like James Martin, and so-called cardinals like Dolan. Um, I forget what's his last name, Kupich. I forget his first name, but I think it's Kupich. He's the Cardinal of Chicago. Yeah, he too is Vatican II and a heretic. Same thing with Dolan, heretic. The So far the only two cardinals I kind of recognize as true Catholics I think would be qualified for the papacy would be Cardinal Raymond Burke and Cardinal Robert Serra. But I've already seen a list of some candidates, um, and I want the conservative cardinals to be one of these conservative cardinals to become the next pope. There's one cardinal from Germany, one from Hungary, one from Sri Lanka, and of course Burke is in there too. But you got some that are liberal. One of them I heard is like moderate. I don't know what to really think about. But you know what? I think in the end, I just thought of recently that either one of these cardinals is elected. It doesn't matter if they have conservative or liberal viewpoints. I, to me, in my opinion, they would still be recognized as an anti-pope because Vatican II is still in place. I don't think it's going to go anywhere for some time until at least someone has the guts to come out and say we got to get rid of Vatican II. It's not helping us. Francis did everything in his everything he could within his power to like do away with the Latin Mass and keep Vatican II in place permanently. I mean, Francis was, of course, a progressive liberal pope. Sorry, forgot the air quotes. A progressive liberal, quote unquote, pope. But not only that, he was also known to be a Marxist because there were some things that did infuriate me. The way he criticized the United States and other countries that use capitalism. He thinks that capitalism is an economic system for greed. Well, it's not about greed. Capitalism isn't greed. I'm not trying to be political, but when it comes to economics, that's a different thing. No, capitalism is our way to profit, produce, and to earn one's own money for themselves, whatever they do within the markets. And that's one way of having freedom, economic freedom to do what you wish, such as starting a business. You sell, you profit, well, you profit and keep what you earn by producing whatever it is you're selling to make that money, which is what I'm trying to say. But like any Marxist, Francis goes out and says that all wealthy people need to spread the wealth around. Well, that's up to people. Well, I know people need to like give like, well, of course, charity, help the poor out is what I'm trying to say. But he wants all wealthy people to spread the wealth around. I'm not saying it's their choice, but of course, it's a good thing to help those that are in need. Of course, there are people, especially the wealthy, that do charities to help the less fortunate. But then, of course, another thing that did infuriate me, especially as an American, the way he criticized our immigration system, especially when Donald Trump was president during his first term. He said, if we focus only on walls and not help build bridges and other things, then that person is not a true Christian. So he's criticizing Trump for putting walls on our southern border. Well, here's the hypocritical thing about Francis, which makes him a hypocrite, especially with liberals in America. Again, I'm not trying to be political here. The Vatican itself is surrounded by walls at least 10, I don't know how high, but they're like 10 feet thick. And yet every pope for a long time has been surrounded by walls. Francis himself has been surrounded by walls. So I don't know why he would even bring this up. Because like I said, every liberal is a hypocrite, especially Francis. And yet he trusts Donald Trump for putting up a wall for our security. Well, when you think about it, for the past 4 years with Joe Biden, he Joe Biden put the United States in an immigration crisis. We had people uh, coming in that were known to be on the terror watch list. We've had military aged men, I repeat, military aged men between the ages of 18 to 35 that look like they've been trained in the armed forces. And that was also another scary thing. And then we've had human trafficking, drug trafficking by the cartels, and we've had notorious foreign gangs like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua come into this country and stir up trouble. And not only that, those gangs that I mentioned took the lives of innocent Americans, mainly women. And under Joe Biden's watch, he did nothing until Trump came back in the second term to fix things. And we've had a lot of bad people, mainly within these gangs, being sent to El Salvador because they were affiliated with these gangs. And yet, Francis in the past criticized Trump just for putting up a wall. Well, our security was on the line here. Joe Biden destroyed it, and so it took Trump. So we had to bring Trump back to like fix what Biden destroyed. Not broke, destroyed. Again, I'm not trying to bring politics into this. I'm criticizing Francis for what he said, especially back in 2016, saying that if you build only walls and not focusing on roads and bridges to help people go where they need to go, then you're not really a Christian. That, that's what Francis said. I'm only quoting him. I'm not. These aren't words that are coming out exactly out of my own mouth. It's what I'm quoting from Francis himself. But I'm trying to be logical here from what we went through with past immigration problems, having to bring Trump in the first time to fix our immigration, then put up the wall, then Biden comes back, destroys it, makes it a complete mess, our security off the chain, and then now Trump's back to fix things. And we've had to deport like over 100,000 people out of the country, but only the bad ones. We don't want to deport all illegals, just get rid of the bad ones. But I know Trump, he'll fix things. He'll settle things with those that are still here, just trying to have a safe haven. Again, I'm not bringing politics into this. I'm only criticizing Francis for what he has said. But still, things about Francis that even Vatican Catholic has brought up is how his so-called pontificate and how he's been running the church. Even I have brought this up. I know that what is it? Peter Diamond, one of the Diamond brothers of Vatican Catholic, he has quoted again and again from Pope Saint Celestine the First and Pope Paul the Fourth on if a pope preaches and teaches heresy, then his office is invalid. So, from what we've learned from all these Vatican II anti-popes, especially with Francis, their office would count as being invalid. Even Saint Robert Bellarmine, the Hammer of Heretics, in the 17th century, of course, who was also a cardinal, he wrote in his books on the role of the Roman pontiff. If a pontiff says anything heretical and he is a illicit, if I remember that correctly, then it's okay to resist him and whatever orders he has for the faithful, etc., etc. And therefore, I basically have criticized Francis for his job. I know that Peter Diamond has referred to Benedict XVI being the worst anti-pope than Francis, but I think in some ways Francis may be worse than Benedict. I really don't know. But one thing I do, but another thing to bring up here in regards to Francis's pontificate, and then of course the predictions of the foreseeing and revelations of Vatican II. We know from Our Lady of Lancelot in France saying Rome will lose the faith and be the seat of the Antichrist. Well, we know already we're living in the end times, how the world is right now, and the way how Francis has run the church. We've kind of like gone from being Catholic Rome to going back to being pagan Rome, as it was during Rome's old republic slash imperial days. Because Francis has brought in people from old old religions of pagan worshiping, like parts of South America, other parts of the world that he's brought in. But he's made the papacy into a circus, is all I can say. And it's not good. Remember, oh yeah, Our Lady of Good Success, who in fact did predict Vatican II. I mean, we were warned like back in the 17th century and didn't take it serious. And there's one more person, not a saint but a beatified blessed. I sometimes get the first and middle name backwards. Hang on, let me get my phone. Let me find it. Oh yes, Anne Catherine Emmerich, an Augustinian nun who lived sometime in the 18th century. Now, as we all know, if you're familiar with that name, she was both a mystic and stigmatist because she had received the stigmata on her wounds. I know I've done a video on a Bible studies video regarding the stigmata because I know there's a one verse by St. Paul in Galatians that did talk about having the wounds of Christ on him. Even she said in one of her revelations, seeing two popes together. So she did foretell seeing both Benedict XVI and Francis together. If I could find that quote, I'm sorry if I'm taking a long time doing this. I know she did mention it in one. If I could find it, I know I'm taking forever. Oh, I know she did mention seeing both Benedict XVI and Francis together. So if I could find it, but anyway, she did see within the revelation seeing Francis and Benedict XVI together. I'm trying to look for the quote. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm taking forever. I'm trying to. I think I. Wait a minute. I think this is it. Here we go. No, this isn't it. Sorry. I'm sorry for taking forever. I duck 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 go. Oh, here we go. Found it. Sorry for the wait, but here's the quote where she sees two popes. In other words, she did see both Benedict XVI and Francis. I saw also the relationship between the two popes. I saw how baleful, evil, harmful, which she says in quotations, would be the consequences of this false church. I saw it increase in size. Heretics of every kind came into the city of Rome. Once more, I saw the church of Peter was undermined by a plan evolved by the secret sect Masonry, while storms were damaging it. So okay, so it wasn't just Our Lady of Good Success. So and Catherine Emmerich in her revelations did did also foretell Vatican II was coming, knowing that the Freemasons were going to be taken over. The conclave of 1958 that got John the 23rd elected. How baleful, evil, harmful. Let me read this one more time. I saw also the relationship between the two popes. I saw how baleful, in quotations, evil, harmful would be the consequences of this false church. She knew that Vatican II was a false church. Vatican II is not the real Catholic Church. This is a false sect, a heretical sect, an end times counter church, which Vatican Catholic has brought up in the past already. Here, I saw it increase in size. Heretics of every kind came into the city of Rome. So, in other words, people of false faith like Islam, Buddhism, and then, of course, sodomites, which would be same sex couples and other people coming into the church that are against the church, coming into Rome. Once more, I saw the Church of Peter was undermined by a plan evolved by the secret sect, Masonry, while storms were damaging it. So she too saw this, and I'm pulling up the. I have the quote up here on my phone. I mean, you can look it up on yourself. If you got like Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, the apps on your phone, just put in Anne Catherine Emmerich, two popes. You don't need to add a slash or anything. You'll find a quote. So we knew for a long time and we ignored it. So yeah, every pope from John the 23rd to Francis, these are all anti-popes of the Vatican II sect. Not Vatican II is not part of the Catholic Church. It is an anti counter church. It is a false sect full of heresy. That's why I do not take it serious. Uh, what was another thing that Francis did? I can't remember now. Oy, it was just in my head. Mm, oh boy, I'm trying to do this video as professional as possible, but I'm sorry. I mean, I had it all in my head. I know I talked. Let's see. The way. Let's see. Oh yeah, those who attend the Latin Mass, those who cling on to traditionalist views, he calls those like me and other traditionalists that hang on to that still attend the Latin Mass as rigid. I'm not rigid here. He is. Francis is rigid. He is a rigid heretic. He is a rigid false pope, a rigid heretic, and a rigid apostate. He's he's rigid. He's the problem. He's bringing the church down on purpose. And everything I just quoted from Emmerich proves it. What's happened to the church? I mean, if I look, I'm not a priest myself or anything like that. But if I had the opportunity, I know I've said this in past videos, if I had the opportunity to be Pope, if I can gain any support, I would fix the church no matter what. I would fix it. I would do away with Vatican II. I would do away with it. I don't care. It would take me a lifetime to fix the church. I would bring back the papal coronation. I would bring back the papal tiara. Not for show, but to show who is in charge, that I'm being serious, and who has the power. Now I remember what I was having a hard time remembering. Another thing that was also upsetting when he issued that one document, I think this was like a year or two ago, I don't remember, giving blessings to same sex couples, giving blessings to sodomites. I forget the name of the document. I know it's in Latin. My Latin's not that good, by the way, but it contradicts what the Bible has said. If you go back to the Old Testament uh, of the book of Malachi, where, where he talks about the cursing of blessings, you bless someone that is not of good faith, bless the blessings would be cursed by someone. You bless someone that is not a faithful, then that person's blessings are going to get cursed by someone higher, uh, by someone that with a higher authority and power. And both, and I've said this in another previous video, including Vatican Catholic, Pope Saint Gregory VII had talked about this. Your blessings will be cursed if you bless someone who is a heretic. And it wasn't just Pope Saint Gregory VII. Saint Benedict of Nursia, in his book The Rule, talked about this in regards to people who have been excommunicated and banished from monasteries. Um, I think St. Thomas Aquinas said the exact same thing too. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I would have to look back at uh, Peter Diamond's video talking about the same topic as well, just like I did in my previous video. So yeah, another thing I also want to bring up, just another thing here that was just brought up this morning on Fox News. Once I found out about the Pope's death, how's the church going to move forward? Do we want to go back to its true conservative ways, like preserving the dogmas and the teachings of the Roman of the Catholic faith, or keep going with the progressive liberal ways that Francis had put forth? And some have said they may continue what Francis has done, being progressive, and then of course being inclusive. That means no doubt. I'm not trying to be, once again, I'm not trying to be political, but what Francis has done, I mean, not only is he a progressive Marxist pope, no doubt he's woke. No doubt he's DEI. He's for DEI. That's why some have said he wants to be more inclusive. Even when the announcement of his death came, you had a narrator on Fox News talk about he wanted to push aside traditional ways and be more inclusive. In other words, be more DEI by welcoming more people with non-religious backgrounds. Well, I mean, non-Catholic religious backgrounds uh, like Muslims, Buddhists, other religions into the church. We got to be more inclusive because that was the whole point of Vatican II. We had to coexist with other religions, even with secularists, like politicians. And he said he welcomed the criticism because it's like open for more freedom of expression here. I'm not talking about free speech, like being more welcome. I guess what Francis was trying to point out here, but that's why he wanted to do with the Latin Mass. He wanted to get a push aside traditionalist ways, what the church has taught for centuries, going all the way back to the time of Jesus. And said we had to be more inclusive. Therefore, he's complete DEI here, and it's a bad idea. If I were Pope, I would have not allowed it. Again, I'm not bringing politics. Just don't want to have any of this woke DEI BS being within the church, because I know in the past he's brought like these Latin American pagan ritual people practice like old religious practices. They're I forget how you pronounce it. It starts with a P, but it's from Latin America. It's like old religious practices, mainly pagan like. And Francis is wearing like this straw hat. I forget how you pronounce it. It starts with a P, but he's allowed it within the church. He's allowed it in St. Peter's. In fact, I would not allowed it. I'm sorry. I would have said no. I'm sorry. I It goes against church teachings and its dogmas, especially what the Bible says. Because when it comes to Vatican II, by being more coexistent with other religions, keep in mind this contradicts what the Bible said, especially with the Ten Commandments. Remember, God said, "I am the Lord your God, and there shall be no other gods but one." There is only one God. No more. There are no more other gods. Only one God. And all Francis has done is contradict everything. So he's an apostate. And and you know what? When it comes to conservative Christian values, even Francis came out and said, when you hear the word conservative, it means people who want to cling on to old ways. Well, that's the point. Those like me that are conservative in traditional Christian ways, we want to hang on to those old ways. We do not want to have these liberal ways where we push radical ideas that would most likely contradict what the church has taught for centuries, and especially the Bible. We don't want that. But Francis allowed it. So yeah, I'm not happy what has happened. I mean, I know he's gone and all, but I'm going to tell you the truth right now. Since he is a heretic and an apostate, I'm sorry, I cannot mourn his death. I cannot. And speaking of how he wanted to be more inclusive with with other religions, I know he's backed up Muslims. Um, I forget I forget what for, but since we still got this war going on in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, which is the terror group in Palestine, somehow he's kind of like been friends with them, kind of like backed them up for whatever. I don't remember. I know this was mentioned on the news this morning. I don't remember, but it's apostasy. He's abandoning the teachings of the true religion that is Christianity, Catholicism, and yet he's siding with other religious pagans and heretics, such as the Muslims of the false religion, basically a satanic cult known as Islam. I do not recognize Islam as a religion. I see it. It's already been said by the Diamond Brothers. It is a false religion and a cult, a satanic cult invented by Satan himself. Especially with all these other religions like Buddhism, Shintoism. These are all evil religious practices invented by the devil. I know Judaism has been around for a long time too, but now that Jesus has been born, and now we know he is the Son of God, and he is the one who founded both Christianity and the Catholic Church, it is now the one and only true religion. And even the prophets of the Old Testament knew this was coming, that Christ was coming. We had our Messiah, we had our King. Another thing when it comes to Francis being inclusive with other religions, especially with the heretical teachings of Vatican II, this also goes against the teachings of other popes from the past. Pope Eugene IV in the Council of Florence in his bull Cantante Domino simply said, whether you're Jewish or you're Muslim or of any other faith, there is no salvation outside the Holy Roman Church. The only way you're going to get into heaven is if you convert to the Roman Catholic faith. There is no salvation outside the Holy Roman Church. If you're Jewish, Muslim, or any other faith, you will not go to heaven. Only if you convert to Christianity, especially to the Catholic faith, there is salvation. That is what Pope Eugene IV taught. I still stick to those teachings by just about, well, every ecumenical council throughout the history of the church I stand by, especially with the Council of Florence. Even I stand by the Council of Florence. So, but however, um, only two councils I do not recognize. That would be, of course, the Council of Constance, which is the council that finally did away with the Great Western Schism when the church was divided with three claimants, and then, of course, Vatican II. I do not recognize Vatican II either. I would also say this in regards to Francis's death. This would actually be for the first time in 20 years that a quote unquote pope has died while in office, because the last time this happened was in 2005 with John Paul II. Benedict XVI died in 2022, but was still living in the Vatican after he resigned. And then, of course, Francis recited by his sorry presided by his funeral when Benedict died. So, from what I heard this morning, that Francis will not be buried in St. Peter's. I think he'll be buried in another church in Italy, somewhere in Italy. I'm not sure, but you know what? I kind of had this thought for a while, way before Francis died, thinking that he would be sent back home to Argentina, where he was from, and be buried in a church there, probably in the diocese where he was both archbishop and cardinal at the time. But no, he'll be buried somewhere in Italy. Well, I just said right now about where he was going to be buried. That was just my own thinking. I kind of, for some no reason whatsoever, I thought if he were to die, instead of being buried in the Vatican, he'd be buried back home in Argentina, which he is from. But no, he'll be buried somewhere in Italy. So I will. Well, without a doubt, I'll be up watching the funeral, even though the time difference wise, all the way in Rome. Even though I'll be up at like early hours in the morning here in America. And like I said, I do not recognize Francis as the true pope. He's an anti-pope. So yeah, he's gone, but I cannot mourn him. I'm sorry. He contradicted everything really badly. He contradicted everything the church stood for, and of course, with his apostasy, standing with other religions, abandoning the true faith, siding with other faiths, especially with Protestant faiths. That also counts as apostasy, because he was siding with the Orthodox churches and the Protestant churches, and not sticking to one church in particular, which is the true Church of Rome. I think, and I think that's all I had to say here. I know I sound kind of slow throughout this whole video, explaining this whole uh, big piece of news that it broke out this morning. I mean, no one expected him to pass on. Oh, another thing that did cross my mind. I just remembered. If anybody remembers, if you're familiar with Saint Malachi, look him up. I know he was an Italian bishop in the 12th century who had prophecies of every pope from his time all the way to Francis, believing that if believing that Francis was the last true quote unquote pope. And even Vatican Catholics said, if, like you said, the moment Francis dies, there was going to be like an apocalypse hovering over St. Peter's. And since that hasn't happened yet, I don't think Malachi's prediction was true. Let me look him up. Here we go. So this is Saint Malachi right here. This is here. Let's see. Let me just read it. Okay. Oh, here I. Oh, okay, I misspoke. So Malachi isn't an Italian bishop, but an Irish saint who was arch who was Archbishop of Armagh 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 Armagh, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, to whom were attributed several miracles and an alleged vision of 112 popes, later attributed to the apocryphal, i.e., of doubtful authenticity prophecy of the popes. Okay, so let me see. I know he lived sometime in the 12th century. Okay, he was in office between. Okay, so he was in office from 1132 to 1136 or 1137. So, okay, I thought he was Italian, but originally he's from Ireland. So I misspoke. Okay, okay, he was born in Ireland but died in Clairvaux in France. Okay, so he's from Ireland but died in France. Okay, so let me look up the prophecy of popes. So there's like a long list here. Let me see. Okay, so from every pope from his time, from Pope Celestine II all the way to Antipope Francis, he prophesied every single one. Let's see, and each one had a motto from a castle of the Tiber. That would be Celestine II, and right here, oh no, never mind. Okay, so from Pope Celestine II all the way to Antipope Francis, he prophesied. Not all 266 popes from Peter to Francis. Of course, like I said, he was born in the 12th century, so no way he can see that from that far back. But so from his time on, well, actually, let's see. Let me go back to his time. Died 1148. Okay, okay. So Malachi was still in office when Celestine II was in was pope. And it wasn't just every single pope, even the anti-popes of the past, he even foretold too, especially the anti-popes of the Great Western Schism, especially all the way to Vatican II. So we gotta scroll down. Let's see. Gregory the 12th. Oh, here we go. Gregory the 12th. I'm surprised while flipping through. I land here. Gregory the 12th. Of course, he was the last true pope of the Great Western Schism, in which he resigned, which 600 years later Benedict XVI would later resign. And his motto was "Sailor from a Black Bridge." Well, Gregory the 12th, like I said, was the last true pope during the Great Western Schism, and later to resign, which later Benedict XVI would later resign 6 centuries later. So let's keep going down. Alexander the Sixth. Here we go. I kind of figured I'd land on him too. Bull of Alba in the harbor. Well, The coat of arms of the Borgia family was an ox, a grazing ox, bull of Alba in the harbor. I don't know what that motto meant, but he did predict Alexander the Sixth's pontificate. Let's see. I'm just gonna keep going down and down. Wait a minute. Okay, here's Benedict the 16th. Glory of the olive. Well, even though Benedict the 16th was also an anti-pope, but I don't know whether they consider him as a conservative or liberal pope, even though he was okay with the Latin Mass to to continue to go on, even though Francis was like very hypocritical of it. For Francis, I'm trying to remember. I forget the Beatrice Noster. I think that would be Francis's motto, but I don't remember. It doesn't even say so here. But it did mean. I mean, it did mention. I mean, Malachi did predict Francis's election. So I'm sorry, I'm taking too long, but I'm trying to see um, the list of the all the popes that were prophesied. Let's see. Lictum Vitea Liber Secundus. This was the list of all the popes that were meant. That would be the list of all the popes that were mentioned by and prophesied by Saint Malachi. So it looks like Francis is not going to be the last. I mean, sorry, Francis will not be the last pope of the church. So the church is going to move on still with another anti-pope, without a doubt, until someone comes and really fixes things, or until Jesus himself returns. I'm sorry I took this long. I know I've been here for an hour trying to explain what's happened, especially with Francis now gone and having to explain his past. I apologize for being this slow and taking forever to explain things and having to look things up. I wasn't prepared for this, having to make a video, but I wanted to respond. I apologize to all of my followers out there. So that's it. But let's make one thing clear. Anti-Pope Francis did not go to heaven. After everything that he has contradicted and has said that was heretical, and things he has done that made him an apostate, he did not go to heaven. He went straight to hell. And here I am, already here almost an hour having to explain this. I'm sorry. I apologize once again for taking this long. I mean, I had most of the all I already had up here already in my head, mostly prepared, even though I didn't write anything down. I tell you what, like I mentioned earlier, Vira Pope, I would do away with Vatican II. I make sure the real church is brought back, no matter what. Even though I'm not a priest without the training, even if I need to get the training done while being Pope. I'm just saying, as an opinion, even though it sounds crazy. If I were Pope and took the name Gregory the 17th, which is the name I would take up, which I just thought of, which I would consider taking, even though Cardinal Giuseppe Siri originally thought of taking that name, even though he turned down his elections twice in 58 and in 63. Since that name hasn't been taken up yet, I would take it. I would bring back the coronation and the papal tiara. not for show or nor any game, knowing that I mean business, to show the church needs to be put back on track. Do away with Vatican II and everything else, and bring back the true church and all real Catholicism back. And you know what? I do not even recognize the canonizations of John the 23rd, Paul the Sixth, and John Paul II, nor John Paul the First as a venerable. I'm sorry, I do not recognize their canonizations or nor anything else. But something tells me in due time, Francis may be up for canonization. The last thing I want to hear. No, without a doubt, they'll say so, even though to canonize someone takes time. Yet, if I were Pope, I would mean business. This may sound crazy what I'm about to say by some. If I Not only would I be a caring, loving, and spiritual Pope, but I would let the critics, the haters, basically what I'm saying is those that hate the Catholic Church, like liberal secularists that want the church brought down, I would tell them I would be your worst nightmare. Every single one of these secularists around the world, I would be your worst nightmare. And I'm not going to let you bring the church down. I mean business, and I mean to fight to keep the church going. Whether it's spiritual or physical, I'm keeping this church alive no matter what. So that's all I have to say. Francis is gone. Now we wait for his funeral, then the conclave, and see who gets chosen. But still, all I can say is this: Jesus, we need you more than ever. We need you as our king and rule all over the world and throughout the universe. We need you back more than ever. You are our king, and we need you. Ave Christus Rex. And Hail Christ the King, Ave Christus Rex. Jesus, we need you back more than ever. Our church is dying, and we don't know what to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. But you know what? About what I said earlier about the church moving forward, it kind of worries me and scares me what could happen after what we saw with Francis and who could succeed him, possibly continuing on with the same progressive liberal ways. That's still a scary thing. And God forbid if there should ever be a Francis II, a second Pope Francis. If that ever does happen, then the church is done for good, completely. And that's scary too. If there's ever a second Pope Francis. Sorry, I keep forgetting the air quotes. It would be like really scary if a second Pope Francis takes over. And I hope my instincts are wrong. But you know what? I've spent some time talking about this. I apologize once again for um, talking this slow, but I'm sorry for talking this slow. I did all I could to explain everything what has happened within the last few hours. Oh, you know what? Another thing, forgot to mention. I know that King Charles III did meet with the Pope a couple of weeks prior before his death, but Vice President J.D. Vance was at the Vatican just for 5 minutes to meet with Francis, and then making his way back to Washington. Another thing I forgot to bring up. All right. I thank you all for watching this. I know it took a while. I know it may sound boring and slow. I apologize, but I just wanted to put this out there. So, to all my to all my traditional Catholics out there who attend the Latin Mass, stay strong, keep praying, and God bless. Amen.